Live from Houston, Texas, the humidity capital of the world, it's time for Money for Lunch, where we feed your brain and your business with supersized portions of business and financial news. Now your host, Bert Martinez.
We're going to be talking with Sidney Goldin. He's an expert that deals with the IRS. Sidney Goldin co-founded Goldin, Pazer & Pazer LLP. As a partner, he oversees the firm's IRS defense practice and is responsible for representing clients in audit, collections, IRS appeals. I'm excited to have him on the show. Sidney, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bert. Appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Great. Now, is it Pazer?
It's Pazer. It's pronounced Pazer. It's Goldin Pazer.
Pazer. Okay. All right, so I was close. Good. All right, so let me ask you this. What is the difference between bankruptcy court and tax court, and who has the upper hand in this circumstance?
Well, bankruptcy court is a court that is designed and established to determine who gets discharged in a bankruptcy, the criteria for discharge, and a number of other issues. The tax court deals exclusively with tax cases, disputes with the IRS, such as an income tax dispute, or other types of disputes, estate taxes, penalties, those type of disputes. Generally speaking, if it comes to priority with the two courts, the bankruptcy court generally has priority over the tax court.
Gotcha.
When it comes to tax cases and, tax decisions.
All right. So I've heard that taxes are very difficult to get discharged. I mean, do they ever expire?
Oh yes, there's a number of ways. One of the ways one of the ways you can discharge taxes is through the bankruptcy court. Certain types of taxes can be discharged, and certain types cannot be discharged. There's also, without going to bankruptcy court, there's a 10-year statute of limitations. If you owe the IRS money and you can weather the storm, there's a 10-year what's called collection statute that gives the IRS to collect the money, and if they don't collect it within the 10 years, then it expires at that point. The bankruptcy court is a forum that you can discharge certain types of taxes, mainly income taxes, if you meet the criteria.
Okay, so how does this work? How do you go about doing it?
Well, if you owe taxes, you need to go to someone, a tax advisor who understands the interplay between the IRS and the bankruptcy court and what the criteria is for discharging taxes. There's generally three different time frames or timelines you have to meet. You have to wait 3 years generally when you file a tax return to be eligible to discharge that income in a bankruptcy petition. If the return is filed on time, you have to usually wait 3 years. If it's a late filed return, there's a 2-year rule that comes into play that basically states that you have to wait 2 years from the time a late return is filed, and a late return is considered late after the filing date or any extensions that you had to file it. So there's a 3-year rule and a 2-year rule, and there's also a 240-day rule. Let's say you're audited and the IRS comes in and assesses tax against you. You have to wait 240 days after that assessment in order to be eligible to file bankruptcy. Now, this is only for income taxes. If you owe payroll taxes, if you have a company that didn't make payroll tax deposits and you've been charged with the trust fund penalty, you cannot discharge payroll taxes in a bankruptcy. It's just mainly income taxes.
Gotcha. All right, so you mentioned something.
So the first thing that we do when a client comes to us and he owes taxes is we order what's called the IRS account transcripts that the IRS has on file for everyone, and we look at all the dates and the amounts, and we make a determination based on what we call a dischargeability analysis from the IRS transcripts as to what years, if any, years that qualify for discharge.
Gotcha. Okay. So let me ask you, what are the alternatives to bankruptcy?
You have alternatives. Bankruptcy is a last resort, but there are other alternatives. The IRS will deal with you in several different fronts. One, you can look to see if a client is eligible for what's called an offer and compromise settlement, where you can go in and discharge taxes for less than what you owe the IRS if you meet certain criteria. And the IRS has eased up on a lot of the criteria relative to what it used to be. So an offer settlement is an alternative. A payment plan is another alternative. And if the taxpayer qualifies for a hardship, you have hardship cases as well that will allow the IRS to leave you alone, so to speak, for a while, unless your situation changes, basically. So those are the three common alternatives to come to mind outside of bankruptcy.
All right, so give me an idea. When you said a hardship case, you're talking about maybe somebody who's been out of work for a while, or maybe has had some massive medical changes?
Someone that can't meet their expenses every month, doesn't have adequate income to meet their household expenses, would be considered a potential hardship case.
Gotcha. And when you say this thing, offer and compromise, how regularly does the IRS accept offer and compromise? How difficult is this? If I come to your office, is it a good likelihood that they're going to take a less than I owe, or is this something that happens kind of like the lottery?
Well, when we evaluate a candidate for an offer, we look at we have the candidate fill out what's called financial statements that the IRS has on its forms, and we can tell from those financial statements whether the taxpayer is going to qualify. We will look at the income and the assets. There's a formula, and if the assets and the income of a person is substantially less than the amount of tax that they owe, they are a potential candidate for an offer and compromise settlement. So the less assets and income you have, the greater chances are that you are a candidate for an offer, depending on how much tax you owe. For example, if you owe $100,000 in tax and the total based on the formula of your assets and income is only $50, then you might be able to settle the case for $50. If the assets and income are $20, you may be able to settle it for less than $50. So it's an evaluation based on the assets and income of a taxpayer that we look at.
Gotcha.
Now, I personally will not file an offer settlement unless it looks like it's going to fly, looks like it's going to be approved on paper. So I have a fairly high percentage of approvals on offers because I screen them pretty carefully.
Okay. And I'm thinking that this is like any other business relationship. After a while, people recognize your name, they trust you, and so the IRS is going to maybe accept dealing with you a little bit easier than maybe if I represented myself.
Well, I think so too, but there's a lot of risks in representing yourself because you don't know all the rules, you don't know what rights you have, and you don't know the criteria that the IRS looks at. And it's like representing yourself in court. It's not advisable to do so.
Right. No, I love the fact that you gave those 3 or 4 rules, and it's like the 240-day rule, the 3-year rule, the 2-year rule. I'm already dizzy.
It is somewhat complicated, but it's simpler than it sounds because you're usually going to fall under one rule, which is the 3-year rule, in probably 80% of your cases, which means that when you file a tax return on April 15th, you have to wait 3 years and a day before you're eligible to file a bankruptcy. That's the most common case, and it's usually pretty simple. It's 3 years, basically, from the date the tax is assessed when you file your return. And that's pretty much it. There are other criteria that need to be considered, and the person needs to consult with a bankruptcy lawyer for that. I only deal in the IRS issues as related to bankruptcy.
Gotcha. Hey,
so
Goldin,
pretty simple,
I appreciate you
actually.
stopping by. Great information, and I love the fact that there's hope there that if you owe money to the IRS, they can go to somebody like yourself and maybe settle it for a lot less money. Thank you for stopping by.
You're welcome. And our toll-free number, if anybody's interested, is 888-346-5346, if anyone has any questions about this.
Great, Sidney. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Bert. Bye.
Tune in Monday through Friday here on Money for Lunch. And check out our website at moneyforlunch.com.